All right, like I said, it's great to be back. I want to thank Sarah and the staff for taking over things while I was away. Stacy and I had the privilege of doing a wedding in Colorado last weekend, and it was kind of nice to go into the semi-cooler mountains. We got a chance on one day to drive up to Pikes Peak. Anybody been up to Pikes Peak before? Yeah, okay, we didn't climb it, we drove it. It was still pretty. What was interesting about that, it was really nice for the first 14, 15 miles of the drive, going uphill, just driving uphill, beautiful trees and stuff. But then you get past about, 12, 13,000 feet, it gets real desolate. And the roads have not very many, if any at all, guardrails, and there's these steep, just sheer, drop-offs, to the end of the earth kind of thing. And Stacy doesn't like heights at all. And I think she's laughing and she's crying. I'm not what's going on next to me. And then sorry, Stacy, but she lays the chair back all the way flat and so looks at the top of the car. I'm like, you all right? I'm fine. Just get to the top, So we get to the top of the mountain, and it was really pretty. And by the way, we asked one of the, because there's some stops along the way, we asked one of the national park people, have folks died driving up here, And he said, only 7 in the last 100 years. That's pretty good odds, right? But Stacy doesn't want to be 8 and 9, so she's still a little worried about driving up we get to the top, and you've probably seen this, you get to the top of the mountain, and it's beautiful, and it's gorgeous, but to be honest with you, it's hard to enjoy this beautiful view because in the back of our head, I'm thinking, I have to go downhill in a rental for 19 miles. And you're thinking, what if the brakes go out? What if the brakes get too hot? And all of a sudden, you're more worried about that than you are of enjoying the view. You with me? Well, obviously we made it back downhill, but it's easy, I think, in life to have that kind of attitude, to kind of focus on our fears. It's almost natural for us to worry about things or to look forward to a future where things are better and there's more security and more safety instead of enjoying what's going on in our world today. And so we ask questions like Austin just saying, how long? How long until we're down the mountain? How long until things are better? This song that we just heard Austin sing in the band by U2 is a song that's called 40. And the song is called 40 because it's taken from the Bible. It's taken from Psalm 40. And in Psalm 40 it says this, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined to me and heard my cry. He drew me up from the desolate pit, out of the miry bog, and set my feet upon a rock, making my steps secure. That's what it says. And it's a very positive thing, right? I waited for God. He showed up. He took care of me. He put me on solid foundations. There's no worried about losing my brakes. It was all good. But what's interesting about the U2 version is they kind of take this very positive psalm and they kind of cry out what we ask. Well, how long till this happens? Right? How long will I sing this song until I really get to experience what Psalm 40 talks about? It recognizes that the world isn't all right. And so we may be asking those kind of questions, which is why we're doing this series. We're looking at this series, and we're calling it Flip Side. We're looking at what's called in the Bible the Beatitudes, these 8 short, simple statements by Jesus that just take the entire world and flip it upside down. They don't say how long or hang in there or hold on. They talk about life today, and they take what is going on in our world and kind of flip it upside down. And these are some statements I think you should hold on to, that you can kind of commit to memory and keep in the back of your head, because you're going to need these. You'll need these. So let's read them together. We're going to do this every week. We're going to read these together to kind of let them sink in a little bit. Here we go. Matthew 5:3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Those are awesome Powerful statements. Not about the future, but about today. And in fact, I want to, before we dig into any one of these, let's give a little overview of why these are so important. And the first thing is, we just said this, is they're present. They speak to the here and now. They don't talk about some distant future that'll all be okay in the end. These Beatitudes, these statements speak to today. Not how long, but today. The second thing is, notice they all say, blessed are, not blessed will be. It doesn't say that if you're this way, you'll be blessed in the future. It says, no, you're blessed now. And that doesn't seem right. Because think about it. It's so flipped to say, blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, how are they blessed now? Blessed are the meek. Do we value meekness in our society? How is being meek a good thing? Blessed are those who mourn. Really? I thought mourning was related to tragedy and sorrow. How are they blessed? But that's what it says. It says, blessed now are they who are meek, who mourn, who are persecuted. Those are hard things to say, much less live. It kind of flips our world upside down. The third thing about these is there's two sets, if you will. The first is it deals with external things. So, for example, in Matthew 5, 7 through 10, it says, blessed are the merciful, right? For they'll receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are those who show mercy to other people. Blessed are those who have integrity. Blessed are those who are peacemakers, who seek peace. Blessed are those who are persecuted, who do the right thing, who are righteous, even though it costs them and they suffer for it. It's the actions we take. The second set are internal qualities. Stuff like, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, who are meek, who hunger and thirst. These internal motivations that drive us to do things. So these can look at the outside world and our inside world, who we are on the inside. And finally, these Beatitudes are not new. This has been the way God's been interacting with us since the beginning. Take verse 5. It says, blessed are the meek. But also in Psalm 37 it says, yet for a little while, and the wicked will be no more. Though you look diligently for their place, they will not be there. Here it is. But the meek shall inherit the land. Right there in the Psalms. Verse 6, Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. But in Amos 11, it says, surely time is coming, says the Lord God, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread or a thirst for water, but for hearing the words of the Lord. Same thing. Verse 4, today's topic, blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. In Isaiah 61, it said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to comfort all who mourn. So even in the Old Testament, right, way back, these attitudes, these Beatitudes, this way of living, of seeing the world, was part of God's plan, part of God's identity, part of God's perspective. It just kind of summarizes that for us in these 8 little statements. And today, we're going to dig into one of those. We're going to do it each week for the next few weeks. But today, we're going to dig into verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. Because this is a hard one. It's hard to say, blessed are those who mourn, right? Blessed are those who experience tragedy. Blessed are those with sorrow today. What does that look like for us? Well, the first thing it says, which I really like about this beatitude myself, is it says, you know what? God recognizes, Jesus recognizes that everything is not okay in the world. Right? God's not out there just doing his own thing and not paying attention. God knows we mourn. He's aware of our suffering. He's aware that the world's not right. So blessed are those who mourn, because it's part of our reality. If I say the words to you, Johnny Cash, what's the first thing you think of? Man in black. Right? I kind of went blackish today, a little black shirt. But he always wore black, right? Did you know he wrote a song about that called The Man in Black? Right? So I thought I would sing it for you today. Why do you laugh? It makes me so sad. No, actually, if I sang it, you would mourn. But here are the lyrics to this song. I will read them to you and save you that. It says this: well, you wonder why I always dress in black, why you never see bright colors on my back, and why does my appearance seem to have a somber tone? Well, there's a reason for the things that I have on. I wear black for the poor and the beaten down, living in the hopeless, hungry side of town. I wear it for the prisoner who's long paid for his crime, but is there because he's a victim of the times. I wear black for those who never read or listened to the words that Jesus said about the road to happiness through love and charity. Why, you'd think he's talking straight to you and me. Well, we're doing mighty fine, I do suppose, in our streak of lightning cars and fancy clothes. But just so we're reminded of the ones who are held back, up front, there ought to be a man in black. He wrote this in 1971, and there was a lot of stuff going on in our country in 1971 when this song came out. It's hard to imagine, but in those days, the United States was brimming with tension and unrest. In those days, people were judging each other based on the color of their skin. There were protests and violence all over the country and in the streets. There were foreign wars and conflicts that some people thought were important and strategic, some thought were unnecessary. There was strife between rich and the poor. There were incredibly harsh political divisions in our country, debates and controversies over ethics and freedoms and morals. Can you imagine what that must have been like living back then? Yeah, you probably can, because not much has changed today, and it might have even gotten worse. But he wrote this song as a song of mourning, to latch onto those voices that are crying out, saying, things aren't right. This is not right. We look at the newspaper or look at news on the internet and say, man, this is not right. So Johnny Cash wrote this song. He said, I'm going to stay wearing black until things are made right. See, mourning isn't wrong. It's an honest assessment. It's an honest assessment of what is happening in our world. It's okay to be sad about it. It's okay to mourn. In fact, it's actually a really good thing. And I'm not talking about just internationally or nationally. I'm talking about your families and your friends. Everything is not okay. And here's why. There's one big reality in the world we need to face. You ready for this? Life is hard. I know that's earth-shattering. Like, really? Yeah, it is. Life is hard. But here's the truth. A lot of adults haven't figured this out yet. And they get mad at God about it. And they get frustrated about it. They get mad at everybody else about it. And they're all ticked off because they forget this. Life is hard. No one said it'd be easy. And they don't embrace that reality. In fact, from the book of Genesis, from the very beginning, life was hard. Right? When Adam and Eve ate that Brussels sprout, remember that? Now, we don't know what kind of fruit it was, but I hate Brussels sprouts, so it must have been a Brussels sprout. So they ate a Brussels sprout, and everything went bad. God kicked them out of the Garden of Eden and said, life's going to be hard. In fact, for the whole creation, life became hard. In the book of Romans, Paul says that the earth itself cries out with groaning until things are made right. The earth suffers with us because life is hard. And so everyone cries out, with you too, how long? How long do we sing this song? So mourning is important because it faces the reality head on that life is hard. It's our starting point. It realizes that sometimes life gets shattered. We don't know why, it just happens. Life breaks and we see it on the floor broken like a vase. We wonder why and how it's going to be fixed. Mourning is the first step. And if we skip that step, if we skip over that step of mourning, what we find is there's more brokenness and pain if we skip mourning. Because sometimes we do that. We maybe pretend it doesn't exist or ignore it. Ignore the pain. Like an athlete who hurts themselves. They're like, I'm fine. It's all good. And they're limping around, right? They're hurt, but they're like, ignore it. We're kind of like that. We just ignore the pain. Or we put on a happy face. An article about Julie Andrews this week. Remember Julie Andrews? Played Mary Poppins, right? Always smiling. Or she played Maria in Sound of Music, right? If everything's good with the song, a little sugar, everything will be great. In fact, the guy who played Baron von Trapp, Christopher Plummer, said of her that he didn't like working with Julie Andrews. Can you believe this? He didn't like working with her because he said, working with Julie Andrews is like getting hit over the head with a Valentine. Now, I'm not saying that being happy and positive is a bad thing. It's a good thing. We should have a positive outlook. We should be happy. We should seek joy, right? Bible says, be joyful people. However, we can't ignore pain. We can't ignore the reality that there is suffering and oppression. Because if we ignore that, if we ignore pain in our life, guess what? It's going to show up someday. It's going to show up, and you got to deal with it. One of my favorite quotes is from this great theologian named Mike Tyson. You know Mike Tyson? He said this, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's true, though. I mean, it is. I mean, we can ignore it for so long, but all of a sudden, it's going to show up, and you got to deal with it. In fact, in Matthew 10, Jesus said this. He said, I'm sending you out like sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. He said, look, you're going to go out and find difficult time. Life is hard. You're going to suffer. You'll find persecution and difficulties, but I'm aware of that. I'm still sending you out. So don't ignore it. Jesus don't want us to respond that way. It doesn't help. So find your pain and name it. Second thing we do sometimes is that we try to escape. Try to escape the pain. We run for the hills. We make like a tree and split. We make like a banana and leave. Like, I know that's wrong, but so is escaping is wrong. It's not right either. We get into things like drink and drugs, or we get distracted with television, or Facebook, or Instagram, or Snapchat, or we look for adrenaline from some reckless behavior, but we look for ways to numb the pain, and that just leads us into deeper levels of pain. We try to ignore it, or try to numb it, escape from it. In Jesus' world, there was a man who was demon-possessed, and Jesus cast out the demon, got rid of it. But then he said this, it's a very haunting passage in Matthew 12. He said, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it wanders through waterless regions looking for a resting place, but it finds none. Then it says, I'll return to my house from which I came. When it comes, it finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings along 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and live there. And the last state of the person is worse than the first. What's he saying? If you don't replace that emptiness with something, it's going to get worse. You can't just numb it or go neutral. You got to replace it. Christians are called to be filled with God's Spirit, to be followers of God, actively following God, not just sitting in neutral, trying to numb the pain. Instead, we lean on God's presence. We don't escape the world, we engage the world. We're called to move in and move toward the messes of life because God is in us and with us. So we actively seek to be filled with His presence. And the third thing we try to do, sometimes to avoid pain, is we try to fix it ourselves. We say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to fix it. I got this. You know, the step up for lip, put your nose to the grindstone. If it's going to be, it's up to me, that kind of stuff. We try to do it ourselves. You pick your favorite. And there is some truth to those statements. Right? I mean, we do want to make the world a better place. God calls us to make the world better. We talked about just earlier that as a church, we want to serve God and be active in our world and help people and help different groups. We want to do those things. We should do those things. But it's easy to make this little turn there. We want to help and serve, but then we start telling God how to do it. See the turn? It's like, God, I want to serve you, but you need to do it like this. And that's an easy, slippery slope to get caught on. We can think we can do God's work without God. King David was one of the greatest kings of Israel's history, probably the greatest king of Israel's history. Right? He was the guy who fought Goliath. He's the guy who was the golden age of Israel, just a powerful king, established a kingdom, built Jerusalem, all this great stuff. He's also a guy who slipped up a lot, who would return to God when he suffered, when he made mistakes and sought forgiveness. And we see that in the book of Psalms, He writes down a lot of these poems about his love for God and his reliance on God, and kind of shows us this open heart about how deeply he trusted God. And we still read those Psalms today. However, even this great king was tempted to fix it, to do it alone. Later in his reign as king, he began to trust in the people and the nation and the army itself instead of trusting the God who got them there. So he said, I'm going to take a census. I'm going to count up how many people I've got, just to kind of show how strong our nation is. So he took a census, and God told him not to do that, to trust God alone, not trust in your army and your people and all that kind of stuff. But David did it anyway. He said, I can do this. I got this. And God became angry with David and punished David. And God took away from him part of what he depended upon. And the punishment was actually against the people. Because of what David did, a plague struck Israel. And 70,000 people died because of what their king did. That's a hard story, super hard story. And in fact, I was teaching this exact story back at First Christian Church in Georgia. And a lady came really angry. She said, that's not true. We just read it in the Bible. It's still not true. It didn't happen. I'm like, well, what do you mean it didn't happen? She said, it didn't happen. God doesn't do that. What are you talking about? She said, innocent people don't suffer, she said. There's always a cause. Really? We want that. I understand what she's saying. We want a cause. We want a reason. When there's suffering and pain, we want to know how it happened, don't we? Why? So we can fix it or prevent it. If we know why things break, we can fix them and prevent them from breaking. I understand that. But sometimes there just isn't causes. There just isn't reasons. We don't know why things break. And in those instances, and many others, mourning can help us turn our hearts and minds back to the God who promised to offer us real and lasting comfort. When things break, we don't know why they break, we can't control, we can't fix it. Mourning is that first step to saying, you know what, God? We're coming to you. We only know that you're the only one who can fix things. You're the one who picks up pieces. You're the one who brings comfort and it lasts, and we're going to turn to you. So how do we deal with tragedy? Well, the first thing is we mourn. Romans 12:15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Recognize that life is hard. There is suffering. We can't fix it. We can't escape from it. We can't numb it. But we can deal with it and face it together. Mourn with those who mourn. And then second, this. Remember that we're people of hope. In 1 Thessalonians 4:13, Paul also writes, so that you may not grieve as others who have no hope. You have hope. So mourn, yes, but don't forget you have hope. Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. Why? For they will be comforted. It's a promise that God is paying attention. God knows that life is hard. God knows it's difficult. God knows we mourn. He knows. But he's also close enough to say, and I'll bring you comfort. Period. To be comfort means to be present. And God is present. He knows, he understands. So we may not know why things break in life. We don't always know why. They just do. But we do believe here, God is saying, yeah, but I pick up pieces. I'm here to bring you comfort in mourning. So be honest about your pain. Be honest about the suffering. And know that God brings you comfort.